This week, we're going to turn our attention to middle childhood. This is the age when many children begin formal schooling. It is approximately from 6 to about 11 years of age. First, let's explore the physical development during this time. Middle childhood has been called the golden age of childhood. Overall, children are relatively healthy during this period. Growth rates slow, and children start gaining about 5 to 7 pounds in weight and 2 inches in height per year. Many children begin to slim down as their torsos become longer. A child at this age has strong muscles and increased lung capacity, which helps with their long periods of playtime. Middle childhood is the age when many children begin to play organized sports. Their bodies are well equipped for such activities. However, it's been said that sports are best for children if their parents stay at home. This is because parents can have the tendency to focus primarily on the competition and less on instilling enjoyment of the game. This can lead to tension, hostility, and become a source of discouragement for a child who doesn't always win. Unfortunately, such children may give up and become less active or experience burnout at a very young age. Listen to a story called College Sports Excess Seep into High School by Frank Deford. The editor of the Sports Illustrated magazine has like a humorous look at the adult mentality applied to sports. We know that unstructured play offers children the ability to be active without penalty and to be creative and improve some of their social skills in ways that structured sports cannot do that. Childhood obesity has become an increasing problem in the United States, Great Britain, and other parts of the world. It is estimated that between 16 and 33% of American children are considered obese. This doesn't mean that they are a few pounds overweight. It is defined as being at least 20% over ideal weight. Childhood obesity has tripled in the last 30 years. Obesity is defined as having a body mass index greater than or equal to the 95th percentile of sex and age. Children who suffer from obesity can be subject to ridicule, bullying, cardiovascular disease, bone, joint problems, and can get type 2 diabetes. The Center for Disease Control recommends that schools examine their nutrition on school menus, reevaluate the offering of food and beverages outside school lunches, and increase physical activity to begin to combat this problem. Here's a copy of a school lunch served at a school a few years ago. A popular meal was served on Wednesdays each week. It consisted of chicken nuggets, a roll, green beans, and mashed potatoes. Let's examine the nutritional breakdown of this meal. Here we can find some alarming information. This menu, which fell within state nutritional guidelines, consisted of 1,181 calories, nearly 3,000 milligrams of sodium, 145 milligrams of cholesterol, and 39.33 grams of fat, of which 20.04 grams were saturated fat and 151 grams of carbohydrates. Ice cream, cookies, chips, and sodas were available at the end of the line for additional purchases. School lunches vary from state to state and school district to school district as well. Parents need to be aware of what is served within the school as well as to consider other sources of high-fat, high-starch food their children are consuming. Now let's explore the cognitive development of middle childhood. Piaget's third stage, the concrete operational stage of intelligence, involves the ability to understand the physical and the tangible world. Children can now classify objects in many different ways. They recognize that objects can retain their identity even if it's modified. So a scrambled egg is still an egg, and they can recognize the identity held by numbers. It becomes easier for school-age children to reverse a set of operations, or to understand that moving backward is a set of procedures that can bring one back to the starting point. Information process theory is a classic theory of memory that uses the analogy of a computer to help us understand how memories are built. The first location for information to enter is through our senses. Seeing, hearing, touching, or smelling are a stimulus in the first step of forming a memory. Most of what comes into our sensory register is there for only a split second and then is either dismissed or moved into our working or short-term memory. Short-term or working memory has a limited capacity of about 9 to 11 pieces of information at a time. Information must be rehearsed to be kept alive in a short-term memories. The long-term or knowledge base consists of information that we have sorted and can access whenever needed. This storage area has a seemingly like unlimited capacity. The key to being able to access what is in your long-term memory is making sure that it is stored in a meaningful way. As a child enters schools, they begin to process information more quickly than ever before. This is because they can find links and meaning in new information, and they can store it a lot easier. Schools often involves learning new strategies to help with their academic tasks. Vocabulary continues to increase through the middle childhood at the rate about 20 new words every single day. A fifth grader knows an estimated 40,000 words, and they begin to understand the meaning of words and play on words. Grammar is more easily learned, and rules or grammar are applied more flexibly. So a familiar name you're going to be seeing time and time again in your education career is going to be Colbert. And what he did is he applied Piaget's principle of moral decision making. And in the pre-conventional stage, moral decision making is based on whether an action brings a direct personal benefit, such as a reward or punishment. And this is where a lot of the middle childhood kids are thinking about as they're about to act on a behavior. Conventional moral reasoning is based on the opinions of others about the act. Still, personal benefit, perhaps in the form of being viewed as right or good, is the basis of that decision to act. And post-conventional moral reasoning is based on universal moral or ethical principles or the good of others rather than the self. School brings assessment of a child's performance, and development problems can be recognized once a child enters the setting. Diagnosing and labeling a child with a developmental problem can help parents, teachers, and others to form a treatment plan to assist the child. But labels can be inaccurate or sometimes misapplied. Nevertheless, the label can become part of a child's self-assessment, and the child may begin to act accordingly. So for example, a child labeled as a slow learner may lose confidence in their abilities and feel self-conscious about that label. This can get in the way of learning and therefore creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. The autism spectrum disorders range from pervasive development delay to Asperger's syndrome. Children vary in the degree to which they exhibit autistic symptoms. The word autism means selfism, or a focus on the internal world. Children with autism spectrum disorders may lack motivation to learn language, be sensitive to detail, prefer consistency, and lack or be delayed in developing social emotions such as embarrassment or guilt. A minority of children with autistic spectrum disorders have unusual talents. These talents or strong interests are more characteristics of Asperger's syndrome. Consider this definition of a learning disability: a measured discrepancy between expected learning and actual accomplishment in particular academic areas. This definition calls our attention to the academic standards we set for children and the labeling process to which they may be subject to. By this definition, raising standards can result in an increase of students who are considered learning disabled. Learning difficulties are specific to academic skills and include dyslexia or sometimes attention deficit disorders. There are numerous conditions that can lead to these difficulties. Schooling brings assessment of intellectual skills. Some assessments are achievement tests. They're designed to measure what a child has learned, and we are administered at the end of the course of a study. Aptitude tests are designed to measure a child's potential to learn and may be used as an entrance requirement. Intelligence tests are one type of aptitude test. However, intelligence tests are not uniformly administered. They're more likely used as a part of a clinical assessment in a situation in which a child needs special attention or maybe instruction. Intelligence tests do not measure all types of talents or intelligence. Howard Gardner suggests that there are many talents, abilities that can set a person apart and help them be successful that go beyond the academic traditional forms of intelligence. His domains of intelligence include logical, which is mathematical, linguistic, and spatial intelligence, which are the kinds of abilities measured by intelligent tests. Other intelligence include body kinesthetic intelligence, which focuses on movement, strength, accuracy, and endurance. There is musical intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, or knowledge of one's own motivation and internal psychological state. Interpersonal intelligence, or the ability to read others accurately, negotiate, communicate, and exhibit other interpersonal skills. A naturalistic intelligence means the such as the knowledge of climate, crops, or animals vital to success in farming or herding. And existential intelligence that involves spiritual or philosophical understanding that address life's bigger questions about existence and purpose. When it comes to Robert Sternberg, offers another model of intelligence that takes us outside of our academic intelligence as well. His theory of intelligence includes academic intelligence, or quote, book smarts, which is the type of intelligence IQ test measure, but also consider key area, creative or experiential intelligence, and practical intelligence. So creative intelligence, are, as some people would say, like street smarts, referred to as common sense, is the ability to understand what is called for in a situation and to act accordingly to that situation. These intelligence are important for success in life. So let's take a different look at school and the world of school as experienced by parents and students. Schools often express a desire for family involvement. Some families bring qualities to the school setting that can influence the child's experience. These qualities, such as like financial support for the school or community, are referred to as family capital. A well-known member of the community or a parent who offers their time, money, and a supportive attitude toward the teacher maybe receive additional resources or guidance to their own child. Have you ever asked a child about their day at school? Chances are the answers focus on the social life at the school. So let's talk about who they hung out with during recess and who was nice to them and who wasn't. Editor Peter McLaurin observed and recorded the amount of time students spent in various states throughout the school day. The student state is a state in which a student is on task, compliant, or focused on what the teacher requests. About 298 minutes were spent in the student state. This is a state preferred by teachers, but many students prefer to spend time in the street corner state. This is a state in which the child is able to socialize with other children and to act as they might when they're not in a classroom setting. Children try to maximize their stage by taking longer in the hallways when going from one class to another, or by moving more slowly when getting out books or other materials. They're really kind of holding on to that state. The home state occurs when family members are at the school. In this state, children are subject to a different set of rules than those set by the school. So for example, a child might get to sit with their parents or leave a class early as a result of this interaction. All schools have a formal curriculum or set of courses and objectives that are clearly written down, but schools also teach powerful lessons, and they're sometimes referred to as like hidden curriculum. These lessons include gender roles, competition, preferences based on social class, race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. The hidden curriculum is not directly states, yet students receive indirect messages about the believed superiority or inferiority of these groups. So for example, a teacher may ignore insults made toward a student for being gay, even if the school has an official policy against discrimination based on sexual orientation. And these little moments start to kind of influence that and set that cultural influence of that school. So let's move on to the psychosocial development in middle children. Entering a school often means entering the society or culture of children. Children establish a language, a set of rules, behaviors, and roles for one another when they're in the school setting. This society of children can serve as a living laboratory for learning and practicing social skills such as negotiating, communicating, and even problem solving. Think about children you remember from your early grades in school. You may remember some children who were known by many and were well liked. These popular pro-social children are highly visible and seem to have the support and the encouragement of the school. And some children are popular, but their popularity means for altercation. So maybe they were known by other students and they had a sense of like being rebellious within the school. It may be hard for these children to change their social behavior as it becomes a part of their persona and their popularity. Some children are withdrawn and they suffer the rejection of other children. This may have some qualities that make them a safe target for bullying, such as maybe being like low socioeconomic conditions, having a physical challenge, or even sometimes being shy. Aggressive, rejected children are rebellious and have altercations with other students, but this doesn't gain them popularity. And why not? Perhaps it is because they're not physically attractive, or maybe their social economic conditions make them less desirable by the other children. School-age children are forming a sense of self or self-concept. This begins early in life, but continues to take shape in middle childhood. In societies where media is very powerful, children may develop evaluation themselves based on images or products in television shows, commercials, or even on the internet. So like social media is going to be obviously a really big one. Erikson believed that these children struggle with industry, and that means it's a stage of being busy and learning about one's capabilities versus inferiority. And to what extent might a child feel inferior in these comparisons? So going back on that question, to what extent are developmental needs addressed in the world that we establish for children? Many of the activities and products created for children may be really designed to meet adult needs rather than establishing those ones for the kids. So think, for example, of an elaborate birthday party given a 6-year-old that is really an effort to establish maybe parental status in the neighborhood or amongst their social circle. False self-training refers to children being held to external adult standards while having their own developmental needs denied. An area in which children are held to adult standards is in the case of like sexual abuse. Child sexual abuse is a sexual act with a child that is performed by an adult or an older child. The developmental immaturity of the child is ignored and the needs are disregarded. So for example, a young girl who begins physically maturing early may be considered to be sexual, although emotionally and cognitively she's not equipped to understand the sexual behavior and its implications. David Finkelhöller described the long-term consequences of childhood sexual abuse. And one of the things he talked about was traumatic sexualization refers to the way in which a child is sexually abused may learn to use sexuality and seduction as a major way to communicate with others. The person may devalue other aspects of who they are and have difficulty thinking of sex and love as part of a relationship, like those two things go together. A sense of betrayal and a lack of trust is particularly strong in the case of incest. The child learns that secrecy and denial of the experience is expected, and that those who are supposed to care for you can also be those who abuse you. A healthy understanding of an appropriate parent-child relationship is lacking, as trust is basically undermined in those situations. A person may also experience a sense of powerlessness or an inability to set limits with others. This may mean being involved in other abusive relationships or unable to say no to demands in time of money or other resources. Finally, the person who's abused may feel stigmatized or looked down upon by others. This can make it difficult for the person to ask for help or to even find support or to be taken seriously in a compassionate way. So let's turn our attention to family structure and relationships. There are a variety of family forms, from two-parent intact families to single-parent families to cohabitating families. Some of us might ask what structure is best, And one way to address this question is to understand the tasks performed by family members. Family tasks include providing food, clothing, and shelter for children, encouraging learning, developing self-esteem in children, nurturing their friendship, and providing a harmonious and stable environment for family life. And so it doesn't, when you think about those traditional roles, if those things are prevalent, that's where the structure really lies, and not necessarily in it being a two-parent or a single parent. Are there other components that are evident in that household? Divorce rates in the United States began to rise in the 1970s and increased steadily until it peaked in the early 1980s. This has been accompanied by great concern over the impact of divorce that has on children. Divorce doesn't affect all children the same way. It really depends. The impact of divorce on children depends on the degree of conflict prior to the divorce, the amount of financial hardship experienced by the children as a result of this, and the actions of the divorcing couple toward the child, and the level of adjustment of the custodial parent. So it's really a lot about the stability of the parents through this process that begins to really influence the children. Judith Wallerstein outlines some short-term consequences for children following a divorce. These include a feeling of loss or grief over family members who are no longer part of the child's life. So it could be whether it's their parent that they don't get to see, or maybe a sibling that they don't get to see as often. A reduced standard of living, perhaps because of the financial strains of the divorce. Now it looks a little bit different. Adjusting to transitions such as changing schools or moving can be challenging, or experiencing relief from conflict that may have been experienced prior to the divorce. So sometimes kids are a little relieved because the tension may not be there as much in the household. Adults who experience divorce as children may have greater anxiety about their own relationships, or they may have unrealistic high expectations of a partner, seeking like the perfect mate to avoid like a future divorce, maybe because they saw it from their parents. Of course, it's hard to find perfection. Peggy Drexler suggests that many of the long-term consequences for children are tied to financial hardship rather than divorce. For instance, there may be some less financial support for schooling that then maybe translates to lower occupational attainment following the divorce. Newer research on the impact of divorce on children have focused on some positive consequences. Heatherton found that most children of divorced lead happy, well-adjusted lives. These well-adjusted adults went unnoticed when researchers focused solely on looking at people with problems and used hindsight to suggest that their problems were due to divorce. Many daughters find their communication improves with their mothers, typically their custodial parent. Parenting becomes more democratic, and children have a greater role in family decision-making as they mature. Drexler found that sons felt freer to escape negative role models if their mothers were in dating relationships than if those negative models were marital partners. So the ability for them to change and thinking that is going to pass is it really influences their own well-being, I guess. And sons being raised without fathers showed more emotional independence and freedom to express emotions in a single parent family as well. So those are some interesting new things, but like any research, it grows and it brings about new kinds of questions about what that all looks like. The psychological health of the parents, especially the parent with whom the child spends the most time, is the key to helping kids adjust during this time. So here are a few tips for parents going through divorce. One is to take care of your own mental health. Find others that can help offer support and understanding. Allow children to express their grief over losses, over what they thought their family should look like and then what it does look like. Try to cultivate a healthy, conflict-free relationship with the other parent for the sake of the children. That co-parenting, and I think the big thing is not talking about ill about their father or their mother in front of them. I think obviously it can take a toll on the children because it's still their parent. And try to establish a home environment that is healthy, positive, and comfortable in light of the current events. Repartnering refers to parents developing new relationships after a breakup. Remarriage is one type of reparenting. So sometimes reparenting can be even harder transition for children than the divorce of their parents. Parenting that may have become more democratic in a single parent household may now become more authoritarian when a new partner becomes part of that family. This can be a really difficult adjustment for children. Step-parents may want to take on parental roles right away, but children may want to establish a friendship first. So sometimes it doesn't seem like we're on the same page when it comes to those things. Reparenting can also mean changes in the amount of time and attention biological parents show their children. The greatest involvement with children may occur before either parent has established a new relationship. The least involvement seems to occur when the father has established a new relationship, but the mother has not. The father may be spending more time with his new partner and children, and there may be some tension as a result between the mother and the stepmother than between father and stepfather due to the emphasis on involvement in the maternal roles. Reparenting also brings about dating concerns. Does the parent have time and money to date? Should the parent have a new partner meet their children? If so, when? What will be their role? Should the new partner spend the night? There's a lot of questions that come into play when there are young children. Cohabitation is one way of reparenting. The partner lives together, but maybe they're not married. And cohabitating families must consider the roles of their partners, the financial contributions to their family, and the members outside of the household. And the effect of breaking up on children may result if they have to sever their ties. What is that going to look like afterwards? Step families or blended families have been increasing since divorce rates began to rise. But step families were also common in Western societies in the 1700s and the 1800s. So it seems like it's new, but it's really not. Especially in a historical context, if somebody might have died because of illness or because of war, for families to join together to pool in their resources to raise offspring has been a very common thing when it comes to human history. Step families of today, however, are typically created through divorce and remarriage rather than due to the death of a spouse or some unknown factor. Sociologist Andrew Sherlin has described step families as an incomplete institution because the rules and guidelines for life in step families are really unclear for a lot of people. Step families may experience greater difficulty than single parent families as they try to establish new rules and roles, and they deal with mixed loyalties and relationships. So it's a very complicated, difficult time. Step families have some characteristics that need to be considered. Step families are structured, are more complex just in its nature. There are more members involved and their loyalties may be divided up. Many step families are established at the same time members are grieving over previous loss following the divorce. So if you get divorced and you cohabitate or you marry afterwards, there's a lot of emotions going on for that child. Love between members of step families has to be cultivated, so it's not instant. It's going to take some time, and it cannot be assumed that they're going to have this bond immediately. The roles that step family members play, whether this is a new step parent or a non-custodial parent, are often unclear, and they have to be established, and you definitely have to have a conversation about it, and sometimes people don't. And sexual attractions may occur and need to be monitored. Modesty and caution when showing physical displays of affection are recommended by a lot of researchers. So this is an effort to establish some guidelines for step family members. Here are some few tips that researchers have suggested. One is to establish neutral territory or routines for the new family rather than having members adjust to the previous family location or routines. If you're a step parent, don't try to fit a preconceived role. Set limits so that new couple can establish their new relationship without unnecessary interference or efforts to sabotage the relationship by the children. Respect past loyalties. So recognize that your partner and their children have a past that should be recognized and respected. If a child is upset with a parent, be neutral about it. Don't get in the middle of this, or you may be resented later for interfering or speaking badly about their parent. So in the heat of the moment, it might seem like you're doing a service to the child, but it might cause damage in the long term. If you're a step parent, don't expect instant love. It's going to take some time to cultivate that relationship. Step families go through developmental stages according to Papernow. This process can take up to 7 years before you really get into your groove. Fantasy about the perfect family, being immersed in the new relationship, and mapping out the new territory are found in the early stages of step family development. In the middle stages, members begin to recognize the differences and express conflict more openly now that they've had some time to kind of settle into this new environment. Step parents may begin to take a stand on their role and position in the family, so they're trying to really show maybe their authoritarian side when it comes to their new family. In later stages, a lot of the hard work of establishing the family's role and rules have been accomplished, and the members make closer contact with one another. So once they've gotten in the ebbs and flows of that, then that intimate bond becomes more prevalent. Acceptance of one another and the family is found at this time. Many step families, however, find it difficult to endure long enough to complete these stages. And so it really just depends on the family, the dynamics, the communication, and a lot of time going through those flows as a new family.